I'm standing out here in the streets of my neighborhood in the middle of the night, my camera seemingly pointing at nothing, trying to ignore the bewildered glances of drivers and passers-by. As I stood there with my feet hurting and my stomach rumbling, I just had one question in my mind. What on earth did I get myself into? I'm a wildlife photographer and I've been doing this for 8 years now. But when you're photographing the same kinds of subjects, the same way over and over again, it can get a little bit stale. So here I am on a mission to challenge myself and breathe new life into my images. This is my new series called Overcomplicating Photography. In this episode, I chased the extremely adorable, yet so commonly overlooked flying creatures of the night. This is the lesser dog-faced fruit bat, and look at those puppy eyes. No wonder they're called dog-faced. Traditionally, bats are divided into two main groups. They are the mega bats, which are the fruit eaters and the nectar drinkers, and it's the group our target animal is part of. And then we have the micro bats, which are mostly insectivorous. So find the bat, whip out the camera, and photograph it, right? That seems a little bit too easy. Let's overcomplicate things a little. I had this idea when I heard about a little technique called rear curtain sync. I like to think about it as a mix of flash and long exposure photography. You see, using a flash acts like an instantaneous burst of light that freezes the frame. In the absence of other light sources, no matter what your shutter speed is set to on your camera, a flash from your speed light always freezes motion. On the other hand, long exposure photography uses a lower shutter speed and a continuous source of light to create motion blur. So what happens if you combine the two? To do this, I need a source of continuous light and a flash. I'm going to set my shutter speed to 1/3 of a second, and as you can see, we have a clear image of my hand and a blur of the movement we make afterwards. Now this is close to what we want, but there's still one more setting that we need to turn on. By default, the flash on your camera is synced to the start of the shutter opening. So whatever happens during the long exposure comes after the exposure from the flash. By turning on the rear curtain sync setting, we can shift the flash timing to just before the shutter closes. Now with rear curtain sync turned on, the same photo looks like this. This technique is more commonly used in portrait photography, and it makes a lot of sense. Because of the long exposure part of the photo, there's a lag between when you press the shutter button and when the main photograph is taken by the flash. So if you don't have a subject that is very predictable, it becomes a lot more challenging. But even so, I think that bringing this technique into my wildlife photography has the potential to create some really unique shots. And so begins my mission to use this exceedingly impractical technique to photograph fruit bats. But I had a plan in mind. You see, there's no shortage of bats flying around in my area at night. It seems like the bats love visiting these fruit trees to snag a midnight snack. And luckily for me, the roads in my neighborhood are lined with plenty of these trees. So one day, I brought out my camera gear, found a promising bunch of fruits, and just set up and hoped for the best. And lo and behold, I got nothing. Not to be discouraged, the next night, I decided to walk down the streets to observe which fruits the bats tended to go for, and I realized that they are extremely picky with the ripeness of the fruits. I theorized that the best time to set up my gear was when the bats had already proven to like a particular bunch of fruits. So I looked out for fruit bunches with a few fruits already missing. And so I set out again with my camera gear for my second attempt. This time, all that scouting around finally paid off. I had visitors to my fruits. Was this the day I could finally put this photo idea to bed? Well, as I soon found out, my camera setup was fundamentally flawed. Here, you can see that some of the bats that I photographed look almost see-through. That's because the light from the long exposure added on to the light from the flash, creating a double exposure of the bat and the background behind it. And thus, I realized that there was another condition that had to be met. And that was the part of the photo that the bat was to be in would also have to be mostly dark. This further limited the fruit bunches that I could use. Not to worry though, because I had already identified the perfect bunch of fruits, but they were still unripe, so I had to patiently wait for them to be ready. I went to my new spot. This time, I changed my setup a little. Instead of the LED panel that I previously used, I just picked up one of my torchlights and positioned it to carefully point at where I thought the bats would approach. And this time, I tested the setup by waving my hand in the frame, and it actually looked pretty promising. Now there was nothing to do but wait. And that night, I watched enviously as the bats foraged for fruits in every single other tree. They just refused to come to mine. In the end, I figured it was probably because the fruits had not ripened properly yet. I didn't know when that would be, so I kept returning night after night. By now, I had gotten used to drivers slowing down to try and figure out what I was up to. I also met this little guy snacking on a dried up fruit. This is a house shrew. Although it looks like a rat, it's more of an insectivore than a rubbish eater. It eats pest insects like cockroaches too, so these guys are doing great work out there. Watching the shrew eat also had me feeling a little peckish, so I decided to figure out why the bats are so attracted to those fruits in the first place.
Apparently the skin is not supposed to be eaten. The flesh is quite sweet. Not bad. It kind of coats your mouth in a weird sort of feeling though.
On the third night of setting up at that same bunch of fruits, I noticed that its size had decreased significantly. That meant the bats had finally started to eat the fruits earlier that evening. I quickly set up the camera and waited, cautiously optimistic. But then 2 hours passed without any action, and as my camera battery dwindled to 5%, I was almost ready to pack up and call it a night. And then, it finally happened. In a flurry of wing beats, there was suddenly more than a dozen bats circling the streets. I froze completely still, afraid that any movement that I made would flush this final chance I had down the drain. Then, one bat flew up to the fruits, hovered for a second, and then flew off again. I think I hit the shutter button at the right time, but I didn't know if I got the shot. Before I could check, the bat circled around for round 2. And then it came back again and again, and I just couldn't believe my luck. I just kept my finger on the shutter, trying to time each approach, and I just prayed that the stars were aligned. When the bats finally retreated and the buzz died down, I looked through my camera roll and I couldn't believe my eyes. I had actually done it. I managed to get 5 or 6 shots with the bat in the frame, and in one photo, the bat was perfectly in focus. I really liked how that photo turned out, but I think I can do even better. You see, even though this particular image had a bat in full focus, I actually preferred the wing beat patterns in these less successful images. So maybe one day I'll try again for the perfect bat photo. Nevertheless, watching this picture grow from just an idea into reality has been one of the most fulfilling experiences in my photography career. Bats are not the most well-liked animals. They are known for harboring some terrible viruses and, well, just being awfully scary when they randomly fly into your house. But bats are such important animals to the ecosystem and to us. Insectivorous bats eat so many pest insects that they save the US agricultural industry at least $3 billion every year. And fruit and nectar bats are very helpful pollinators that help grow fruits like mango, banana, and even durian. Needless to say, without bats, we'd be living in a much more insect overrun and much less tasty world.